The first time I truly understood how powerful a dream could be was when I realized an entire empire had been built on the fear of waking up from one, not a personal dream, a collective one, a dream so vast, it stretched from Moscow to the stars, woven through propaganda, secrecy, and the relentless pulse of human ambition. This is the story of how the Soviet space program became more than a technological race. It became an emotional monument to belief itself. In the early days of the Cold War, two superpowers stood on opposite ends of the world, each claiming they held the future in their hands. But while America broadcast its rockets on live television, inviting the world to watch and judge, the Soviet Union did something far more calculated. They wrapped there in mystery. They released images only after success. They turned every launch into a legend before the engines even cooled. And in doing so, they didn't just win launches, they won hearts. The genius wasn't in the engineering alone, though the engineering was breathtaking. It was an understanding that space wasn't just a frontier of physics. It was a frontier of emotion. Every Sputnik beep transmitted across the radio wasn't just data. It was a heartbeat, a metallic pulse that whispered to the world, we are no longer bound by gravity. And if we can escape the Earth, what else might we escape? Poverty, oppression, the past itself. That's the dream they sold. And millions believed it. But behind the Iron Curtain, the reality was far more fragile. Cosmonauts trained in facilities that were half visionary, half improvised. Yuri Gagarin, the man who became the face of Soviet triumph, was strapped into a capsule with a parachute on his back and a 10-day food supply, knowing full well the re-entry system was untested under real conditions. He smiled for the cameras. He spoke of the beauty of Earth from above. But in private recordings later uncovered, you could hear the tension in his voice, the awareness that he might not return. And yet, he went. Why? Because the dream demanded it. Because to be chosen was to become immortal, not in the flesh, but in the story. Gagarin understood that his life was no longer his own. It belonged to the narrative, to the propaganda machine that would use his face on posters, his name in songs, his smile to inspire generations of Soviet children to believe that their system, their way of life, was destined to lead humanity forward. And it worked. For decades, it worked. Fear played its role too. Not the fear of space itself, though that was real, but the fear of being left behind. The fear that if the Soviets reached the stars first, they would also reach the future first. American children practiced nuclear drills under their desks, but Soviet children were taught to see the cosmos as theirs by right. Every launch was a victory not just over gravity, but over the West, over capitalism, over the idea that freedom and progress were synonymous. The space race was never just about rockets, it was about proving which dream could survive the void. Historians often focus on the technology, the R-7 rocket, the Vostok capsule, the closed-loop life support systems that were genuinely ahead of their time. But what made the Soviet space program emotionally Soviet wasn't the hardware, it was the way it was presented. The state controlled every image, every interview, every scrap of information. Cosmonauts who failed were erased. Missions that exploded were never mentioned. Only success was allowed to exist in the public mind. And so the program appeared flawless. Divine, even. This is where propaganda transcends mere manipulation and becomes something almost religious. When people believe in something so deeply that contradictory evidence doesn't just fail to convince them, it strengthens their faith. Soviet citizens saw the achievements and felt pride. But they also felt something deeper. They felt chosen, part of a grand historical experiment that would justify all the sacrifices, all the shortages, all the fear. The space program was the proof that it would all be worth it in the end. Then the curtain began to lift. Slowly at first. Whispers of disasters. The Netherlands catastrophe in 1960, where over 100 engineers and military personnel died in a launchpad explosion, hushed for decades. Cosmonauts who never returned, their names quietly removed from records. The exhaustion of resources, the realization that the dream was consuming more than it could ever produce. And finally, the collapse. When the Soviet Union fell, so did the illusion. The archives opened, the truth emerged, and the dream revealed itself not as prophecy, but as performance. What surprised me the most wasn't just how a quality space history documentary set improved my experience with understanding Cold War propaganda, but how everything started to feel different once I switched to the right one. I didn't expect such a clear change, and honestly, I tested more than a few before finding what actually worked. This isn't a promo or sponsorship, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference for me. I'll leave the link below, in case you want to dig into it yourself and see what I mean. But here's the haunting part. Even knowing the truth, even understanding the manipulation, the dream still holds power, because it was never entirely false. Gagarin really did orbit the Earth. Valentina Tereshkova really did become the first woman in space. The Soviet program really did achieve things that seemed impossible. The dream was built on lies. Yes, but it was also built on genuine human courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice. And that's what makes it so difficult to dismiss. It's easier to call something entirely good or entirely evil, but history is rarely that clean. Today, when we look at space exploration, we see private companies, international collaborations, transparent failures broadcast in real time. The mystery is gone. The propaganda apparatus has been replaced by live streams and Twitter threads. And in some ways, that's progress. But we've also lost something. That sense of collective awe, that feeling that reaching the stars was about more than profit or science. It was about becoming something greater than ourselves. The Soviets understood that. They weaponized it, but they also, briefly, made it real. So what do we take from this? Maybe it's that dreams are dangerous when controlled by those who profit from them. But they're also necessary. Without them, we don't reach, we don't risk, we don't grow. The key is learning to dream with our eyes open. To pursue the stars without forgetting the ground beneath our feet. To believe in progress without surrendering our ability to question it. The Soviet space program was a monument to what humanity can achieve when it dares to imagine the impossible. But it was also a warning about what we lose when we let fear and propaganda shape our dreams for us. The cosmos doesn't care about our politics. It doesn't choose sides. It simply is. Vast, indifferent, beautiful. And maybe that's the real lesson. That the universe was never the prize in the Cold War. It was the mirror, reflecting back whatever we brought to it. Ambition, fear, hope, lies, truth. All of it, spinning together in the void, waiting for us to decide what kind of story we want to tell next. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.